pretty devastating hurricane. Like I said, I've been here 47 years, nothing ever like this. So, the new paradigm in aging, how to effectively decrease. So this whole event started for me almost 5 years ago, and this whole aging thing. And what we've concluded and created, and Dr. Kim's created, is a paradigm which we now use to accelerate tissue repair and healing, which wasn't just the initial intent. And it also helps to push through. What was interesting is we found that it also pushed through some really tough, stubborn cases that weren't moving forward like they were before. So that really wasn't the goal initially. For my research, it was just to figure out how to get younger as I'm getting older, since I'm 72 now. So, well, biologically, I'm 64. But anyway. All right, next slide. That's just my office, my staff, which about probably a third of them won't be in office tomorrow because they're dealing with all kinds of electrical. Three of those people had their roofs blown off. Ooh. And to the right is my warehouse where we have all of our supplements that we ship out as well. Next slide. We had the whole second floor of that building too. So this has been, actually now that could probably be 5-year-long project because that's what it's going on. Next slide. And again, my goal was to really just try to make a difference in my longevity, mainly for selfish reasons, was the original purpose of why I did this, to be quite frank. For myself and my wife, because it's like we love traveling, we love spending time with our grandchildren and being very active and interactive. So I wanted to find out if there was anything real out there. But I know there's a lot of promises on the internet, but I was looking for the real McCoy. And fortunately, we came up with some solid answers that get some solid results. Chronological age versus biological age. Biological age is the actual rate your body's aging. Your chronological age is your birthday. Next slide. Core functional fundamentals of all aging. Aging is the foundation of all chronic disease. This is not my opinion. This is the opinion of many, many scientists that spend their lives in labs researching the foundation for aging and how do you make it change. So we know if people have cancer, we know that a lot of their hallmarks have been, at this point in time, I'll use the word out of whack for a long time and very severe. Heart disease, you can't have heart disease and have these molecular biomarkers imbalance, can't happen. Every one of these, you have a cellular issues going on with what we're going to get to here in just a minute. But I want you to keep this in mind because it's real easy to jump to the Band-Aid approach. Someone's got cardiovascular disease. What do they want to usually do? You know, you want to treat cardiovascular disease from a standpoint of, okay, do they need cardiar or whatever? But you also got to really look at the whole cellular function. And in any of these to get any long-term benefit and results that have a bigger impact. And to be honest with you, doing this for 47 years, I can tell you really have to do that. There's too much Band-Aid nutrition going on out there today. And I get it's a hell of a lot, heck of a lot easier. I apologize for that. It's a heck of a lot easier to do Band-Aid nutrition on the internet than it is to really do a deep dive to find out what the underlying causes are. Next slide. Aging is defined as the impact, and this is about the simplest definition I could find that really tells you what it is. It's the accumulation of a wide variety of molecular and cellular damage over time, and that we're going to get into what that is. And it's really boiled down to a dozen or so. And this leads to gradual decrease in both physical and mental capacity. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, aging is the foundation for all chronic disease. And once that kind of sinks in, then it takes a new perspective on how you look at things rather than following the typical parameters or paradigm that we normally use. So this will change the dynamics, and hope by the end of this, you get a much clearer picture as to why you really need to address that whole cellular level issue. Next slide. All aging happens on a cellular level. Again, this is not my opinion. Multiple scientists agree with this and say, no doubt. But the tricky part of this is all happens on a cellular level doesn't mean it's one thing that is consistently always happen on a cellular level. And as you're going to see, it's not the kind of stuff what you're always typically told to address, even on a cellular level in some instances. Next slide. This is Dr. Sinclair. Dr. Kim and I were speaking about him. He's been speaker at several of the scientific meetings that I've been to. One of the things he said, and he said in his books, and all the others have too, is it's not one thing that's the problem. It's a multiple known group of things that as they gradually get more damaged over time, then the more of them are damaged, the number of them and the severity of it, the faster you're going to have tissue that is aging quicker, causing chronic disease. Next slide. These are the 9 hallmarks of aging. So the 9 hallmarks of aging is what the scientific community came up with back in 2013. There was over 500 scientists. They came to all agreement to these 9 hallmarks. Now, the trick in this is a lot of these hallmarks affect each other in a negative way, some in a positive way also. But the other factor of it is you have to keep in mind there are some of these hallmarks, and I'll give you a good, like dysregulated nutrient sensing has like 4 or 5 different molecular biochemical molecules that play a big role in the chemistry. Like dysregulated sensing is really associated with insulin resistance and a lot of other things. So you're getting into like AMPK, mTOR, and others that we'll talk about here shortly. But when we looked at it, the more and more I kept hearing this over and over, and then you broke down each piece of it, you find out that there's so much even practitioners are not either thinking about, haven't been told, or aren't looking at when they're really trying to make a true tissue repair and healing occur. Next slide. Should have brought some water with me. Okay. Each of the hallmarks of aging affects all the other hallmarks. So like if you have stem cells or you see, actually the reds are the bad. So this is obviously, if this was in your thyroid, this would be a bad indicator. You've got only 2 out of the whole 9 that are functioning healthy, but they do affect each other. And the more unhealthy they are, they can affect the other areas as well. So this is just a simple description, but I created this because I really wanted you to start thinking out of the box a little more about these hallmarks and the effect it has on you really creating health and the person you're working on. Because I promise you, there's thousands of studies and research and books and scientists that will tell you that the degree each one of these are out of balance, are the faster that tissue, whether you're talking about a thyroid, a brain, a gut, a heart, or whatever, is aging. Next slide. Yeah, so the danger of addressing 2 or 3. So again, this is a quote from Sinclair. He believes the crisis motive occurred because the focus of aging research was just trying to always identify the one thing. And generally that's what medicine does, is looking for the one thing. And any of us who've been in this any length of time know with most sickness and disease processes, it's never one thing. Next slide. One of the 9 keys are out of range, the other 8 keys are negatively impacted. Correct. Next slide. This is just demonstrating to you the more hallmarks. I gave this a title for a brain tissue. So you have to kind of think like that, because you could have a brain that has a lot of the hallmarks out of balance. So in terms of cellular health, it's out of balance. So we're talking about cellular health there. And the more severe the symptoms, which is kind of a clue that you got to have a lot of these not doing the job the way they should anymore because of the damage over time from chemicals, toxins, viruses, etc. Next slide. There's the heart, same thing. So again, I'm trying to, what we've really got out of this is this whole cellular health healing is not the, yes, methylation. Methylation's been around a long time, and everybody, all of us that have been in the natural community as far as methylation, but there's a lot of these others that you really got to address, or you're not going to cross the finish line on really making, turning these people around and actually making a true change in their health if you're not. And I'm just trying to get this learning. This is our model that we have used for years, except for, so we have a 3-step process. We first look for the toxins, the chemicals, the bugs, the parasites, bacteria, blah, blah, blah on the left. And because all these things cause inflammation and oxidative stress. So then we're addressing the left column first with Virox or whatever the products are, depending on what their test finds. At the same time, we're using either cytosem and IntegraCell we use. If you go to the right now, where it says cellular health, these are all the 9 hallmarks. And in the middle bottom, those are where we use the tissue repair products. So I'll use tissue repair products with the right-hand column, cellular health and healing, because now as you're going to see the products Dr. Kim has available is very exciting, because we can address all this stuff with those products. And again, I haven't found anybody that's really hit a home run on this acetylation, phosphorylation, oxidation and that type of thing with products like he has. So next slide. So that's our model that we use. Again, these are our tissue repair and healing products we use. And sometimes we use them before, and sometimes after we address the cellular health and healing. Next slide. I am a big fan. Like I said, probably 8, maybe 9 out of 10 of our adults we have on IntegraCell and CardiR, and I'll tell you the reason why. And this is my opinion is, first of all, IntegraCell, if any of you, and probably a lot of you haven't heard my seminar I did on IntegraCell about 6 or 7 years ago, but I tested it against a lot of other so-called Nerf tube products, like Protandim, and I won't mention others. And nobody says that their product will change oxidative stress in a couple hours. So I'm just curious, I got like 50 employees. So guess what? I have a lot of people that I can do research with. So I have them come in and get a test for oxidative stress. And then I would have them actually take the IntegraCell, or I had 8 other companies, Nerf 2 products. If you guys know what Nerf 2 is, what activates the primary antioxidants. So, and I would just want to see now, and because, that's a very powerful product, and I still haven't found anything else that activates Nerf 2 like that does. CardiR, I love it because the obvious, everybody goes, oh, that's great for blood pressure. And it is, but it affects stem cells. It affects, it also affects telomeres. It also affects, it's antibacterial, antiviral. It does a whole slew of things. And kind of IntegraCell downregulates TH1 and CardiR downregulates TH2. So they're kind of nice balancing effect also for the immune system. So yeah, next slide. I think I already jumped the gun on that. Yes, two types of antioxidants, primary, secondary. The secondary antioxidants like vitamin A, vitamin C, CoQ10 gets one molecule of secondary antioxidants, gets rid of one molecule of free radicals. Next slide. One molecule of primary antioxidants. Now we're talking about SOD, glutathione, and catalase, and I know glutathione is the, I think, considered the supreme being by some practitioners as being you need catalase and you need SOD. The mitochondria need SOD. So you need all three of them, but one molecule of each one of those gets rid of, quenches over 1 million molecules of free radicals. So there's no comparison. You can back up a truck of blueberries every day. Not that I don't think you shouldn't eat blueberries, but you could back up a truck of blueberries and eat the truck full, and the next day start another truck full, and you're doing a 1-to-1 antioxidant hit versus 1 to 1 million, getting rid of 1 to 1 million. So anything and everything that really upregulates NRF2, which is the key to upregulating these three primary antioxidants, is where the big home run is. And in every cell in your body too, that's what's key. This is an example I did with one of our staff. I want to show you before and after. That was before on the left, which is an an oxidative stress test we got from another company. And the more red it is, like it goes up to a 7, the higher the oxidative stress. And then I had her took the IntegraCell, and 2 hours later, that's the change. That's a really big deal. I don't know how many people are on this, but this presentation, but I tested, and I'm not naming companies, but at least 7 other companies from very prestigious, even one neuroscientist, and none of them profess to do this in 2 hours. So there's my disclaimer. None of them said, well, we can do that in 2 hours, which I get, but I was curious. And this is what happened in 2 hours. I did this over and over with staff, got the same response. I up dosages on those other products. Like some of them, they would have to take 8 tablets, which there was only 30 in a bottle, to even come close to this. So, until someone can show me their NRF2 does this kind of work in this short of time, it's still my favorite NRF2 activator. Next, so here they are again, and you can see them over here. And so besides CardiR and so now we're getting into the 9 hallmarks. So this one is called deregulated nutrient sensing. Okay, so deregulated nutrient sensing is you have multiple metabolic processes that happen involved in deregulated nutrient sensing. And this is where your insulin resistance happens. This is where weight gain happens and everything else. So if you look at this one of the molecules involved in this is AMPK. I'm sure you've heard of AMPK. AMPK, if it's too low, is associated with everything from gaining weight to high triglyceride to mitochondrial dysfunction. All these things, if you have low AMPK, is associated with these health issues. So that's a really big deal when you're talking about that one particular. So this is one molecular process in one hallmark. And there's 3 more we're going to cover. Next slide. There's AMPK again. This AMPK shows you it inhibits mTOR, which we'll get into in just a minute. See the red? It inhibits NF-kappa B, which is your what? That's what stimulates all the pro-inflammatory cytokines. It upregulates NRF2 also. It also upregulates sirtuin-1. What's sirtuin-1? Sirtuin-1 is your is one of your longevity genes. So that's pretty cool. It upregulates FOXO. What's FOXO? FOXO is something that helps decrease cellular sustenance, which is one of the other hallmarks. And it also upregulates P53, which plays a big role as far as the immune system. Okay. If you can see down there, it says, so if you have a decline in AMPK, you decrease autophagy, which you've all heard about autophagy multiple times, I'm sure. So AMPK is critical on that. And actually it doesn't, because FOXO is also related to autophagy as well. So all these are play a big role. They're under the dysregulated nutrient sensing hallmark. Next slide. Now, I'm a big fan of Zenadapt because Zenadapt, if you look up the ingredients in Zenadapt, every one of the herbal ingredients in Zenadapt are AMPK activators. Every one of them, okay? So also the other thing is IntegraCell is important because guess what? IntegraCell also activates NRF2, which activates AMPK. So I don't think I had a picture of that, but NRF2 activates AMPK and AMPK activates NRF2. Actually, they both have that cyclic response. Mitochond, Zenadapt is my strong one for that piece of it. I'll use mitochond, but I use it more for other areas you're going to see in this picture. But just keep it in mind, please, and definitely think of NRF2 activator, which is your IntegraCell too. Next slide. Genomic instability, we all know what that is. Genomic instability is where the DNA has been damaged. And we know, how does DNA get damaged? It gets damaged from oxidative stress, inflammation, environmental toxins, viruses, etc. So that's why you have to address all those underlying causes first, or at least in some order. And then here it goes back to what puts out oxidative stress? NRF2, IntegraCell, okay? You can use glutathione too to help with that. But the other thing is NADH, because NADH activates we're going to get to this in just a minute, but it activates your sirtuin 1 through 7, your longevity genes, which repair all this damage. Next slide. So NADH, it's in here because it activates the sirtuin genes, which repair the DNA, or repair the DNA damage. The rhodopsin, which helps with the inflammation, and the Zenadapt 2. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I use a lot where we're talking about DNA damage. Those are the main ones. And again, I have IntegraCell in there too. But rhodopsin is good because that's your glutathione as well. Next slide. Stem cell exhaustion. This is the one I like to talk about, and mainly I do simply because we all know what stem cells are. Most stem cells are made in bone marrow and then they come out. Here's the question I have for you about stem cells. Who has gotten stem cell shots? Anybody? So I know of about 11 people that have. Out of those 11 people, I know of one that got a long-term positive reaction. I know of 3 that felt worse, and the rest of them, about 3, felt a little better, came back worse again, and that's why he ended up at our place, and some that got no response at all. Here's the issue. Stem cells, when you get stem cells, whether you extract them from the person, which probably means they're in worse shape, when you extract them from the person, how many of those stem cells are healthy? So the reason they have a title, stem cell exhaustion, by the scientific community is they know that a lot of stem cells are in just as bad a shape as heart cells, red blood cells, kidney cells, and everything else. So if you're getting a beautiful syringe full of stem cells that have been spun down and everything, first of all, you don't know how many's in there. But secondly, you know to the degree of health those stem cells are. Now, if you're saying, well, what about if you get them from umbilical cords? Well, that's another thing. You still have to know how many's in there and how healthy they are. So stem cell exhaustion is the same thing that happens to a heart cell, kidney cell, liver cell. It's where all the, under the causes I showed back about 10 slides, it's where all the toxins, chemicals, everything else that damages, causes oxidative stress and inflammation. They damage stem cells just like they damage kidney cells, heart cells, and liver cells. So you got to have healthy stem cells for them to turn into something you want to make healthy tissue, whether it's heart cells, kidney cells, or whatever. So it's just a thought I want you to keep in mind, think about. So yes, is this addressed? It's addressed to the cellular health program that Dr. Kim's created, and you have to make stem cells just as healthy as the rest of the cells for them to be the most efficient and effective that they were designed to be. Next slide. Altered intercellular communication. I like altered intercellular communication because one, we're talking about the way the cells communicate with each other. If you look up all the research under this hallmark, most of what you read about is it's associated with inflammation and oxidative stress, damaging the receptor sites and damaging the material between the cells. So I'm a person who is a strong proponent of supporting nutritional support for the extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix is the tissue between cells that hold the cells in place. And you don't hear a lot about extracellular matrix. I know there was a Dr. Oshman, and I believe he's a acupuncturist who wrote a whole book on how acupuncture works, and it's through the network of the extracellular matrix. And the extracellular matrix is not made up of cells. And let me repeat that. The extracellular matrix is not made up of cells. It's made up of multiple protoglycans, proteins, water, minerals, and amino acids. So there's communication that goes along those lines. And like Dr. Oshman thinks, there's a whole electrical system of communication that goes along those lines. The lymphatics lay in the extracellular matrix beds, so do the arteries and capillaries lay in the extracellular matrix bed. So this extracellular matrix is something that I think will eventually be in the added to the 9 hallmarks, because I've already had one scientist that I've got their information about their proposal. Because if you have, let's put it this way, if you go look up fibrosis of the lungs, the kidneys, the heart, any of those diseases we talked about, chronic diseases, the extracellular matrix turns fibrotic. And when it's fibrotic, cells can't communicate real good anymore. And if they can't communicate real good anymore, how do you expect them to become healthy and work properly? Okay, so we get into stem cell exhaustion. So we use methylation products, we use phosphorylation. And phosphorylation is so cool because you got to have phosphorylation to even make ATP. So it's in the whole process of that, that chain as far as chemical reactions in the mitochondria that you have to make ATP. Also, methylation. Again, most of you have heard about methylation and probably had the seminars on it, so I won't spend too much time on that one. And again, in stem cell exhaustion, I am always limiting the causes and making sure I'm using NRF2 activator and anything else I can do to support the stem cells. I think one of the fascinating things about what Dr. Kim has done is he's done this form code. And that form code is really cool. And I don't know how many of you on this call have really dived into what the potential or possibilities of form code is, but this is my opinion. I think it acts very much like a way of resetting and rebuilding, whether you're talking about stem cells or the tissue. So I think it acts on a level. I mean, I haven't seen anybody that's created what we're talking about here that he's got, where he has the actual amino acids at the same proportion to the tissue. So if you got a liver tissue, then you have the amino acid structure that's the same amount and identical. And Dr. Kim can always elaborate much more on this than myself. But I think that's pretty cool. I think that's kind of like stem cell stimulation or complete support of rehabilitation of that particular cell, whether it's a kidney, heart, or liver. So I won't ramble on too much on that. Cytosem, again, for all the inflammatories. I don't know how many of you use this product, but I love it because it puts the fire out. I mean, there's I think I did a talk on this 5 years or 4 years ago. I literally looked up all the herbs in there to see what effect they had on pro-inflammatory cytokines, and you'd be surprised that they like each herb affects down-regulates certain pro-inflammatory cytokines, and what one herb doesn't affect, the other one does, and the other one does. So it's and they overlap as well too. So it's really a cool product. And again, this is my opinion of it here and what I've researched on it to look at it and see how it works and why it works so well. But we use it a lot in the office. Altered intercellular communication, mTOR. So here's a big one. It's changed the signals between the cells. We talked about that. Cells of the age increase self-preserving signals. So again, cell membranes, another issue you have to worry about from the oxidative stress, toxins, etc. And again,
Rebucel.
Thank you. That's designed for the cell membrane, which, you know, you got to heal the cell membrane or you're not going to have, and that cell membrane is made up of the phospholipids, and because you got to have that communication going on from the exterior to the internal. Able, again, Able is pretty cool. I don't know if any of you used it yet, but I take this. I take the new ones like crazy. And I alternate from the capsules to the liquids. So I'll do liquids like in the morning, and sometimes and then I'll do capsules in the afternoon. But the Able, the phosphorylation, how it's changed me is my energy. I mean, you know, for someone 72 years old, I'm looking for more projects to do and create. I just love it is because I know, and I'm now doing something called my biological age testing about every 6 months, and I haven't because I've been involved in all these projects. But these products, if you haven't experienced them, you need to take them yourself, particularly if you're older than 45 years old, because you're going to see some really amazing changes in your energy, in your focus. Your brain is sharper and everything else. And I think it's so exciting. Of course, this is another one of your hallmarks of aging, and everybody's familiar with mitochondrial dysfunction. It occurs when the mitochondria do not work as they should. And again, that happens from oxidative stress or deficiency in SOD and glutathione and all the toxic stressors, because mitochondria function produces chemicals, reactive oxygen species that cause negative impact if you don't make enough or have enough SOD or glutathione to help disband them or dysregulate their effects. So this is where the mitochondria form that. Yeah, so the mitochondria's a biggie, the Phil oxidant, because what does a B oxidant do? It helps motivate cellular energy in the mitochondria, also with the fatty acid management. So this is a big deal. You know what? We're actually using this with weight loss people now. So I'm trying to keep some numbers on it to see. And then the Phil oxy, that helps as far as assist in removing things, but it helps with oxygenation is what we've seen as well. So yeah, if you're 50 or older, take these, please. You take them for 6 weeks. If you're not thrilled to death, you can call me and tell me, okay? Phil oxy, B oxidant, Metacon, next one. And we use NADH, and I'll tell you why we use NADH instead of NAD. because NADH, the original books written on the power of NADH were on NADH because it's a more stable molecule than NAD. But it's the same effect. Energy production, ATP, you have to have it. Chromosome stability, because NADH helps stimulate the cytokines that we talked about that help repair the DNA, as you see next. It's also an immune signaler. It's an energy enzyme activity, because if you're making NADH, the mitochondria is working better, which makes ATP, and it helps support longer telomeres, as does some of these other products as well. And it supports some of the neurotransmitters and brain health. And again, you just saw here the sirtuin 1 through 7, which are your longevity genes. So we get good results with NADH, and we'll change it depending on the person and the age. And sometimes the doses will start out just to see how they respond to it, a low dose, and gradually move up. But if you got people that are really dragging their butts, I know that's not an official medical term, you put them on NADH and mitochond, and we'll also do the Adrenax, and we'll usually do the phosphorylation too. You give that 2 weeks. If you got the right dose, they're perking up. And you know, when you get people, particularly if they're new ones, you kind of got to give them something that they can see some difference. And again, I'm not promoting the Band-Aid process, but you also have to remember these people in their mind have a time limit on what their expectations are. And it's a common thing we normally do is we will ask them how after we go over their test results and everything, we'll say, well, how long do you think this is going to take to fix? And the reason we ask them that question before we even get to the recommendations is because once they give you that answer, you know if you're on the right page with them or they're totally out in left field. I mean, if they say, well, about 2 weeks, or if they say, oh, this is going to take a year, then I'm relieved because I know I can do it in a lot less time, but not in 2 weeks. So, you know, people are interesting as to their perceptions and how they perceive things. So sometimes giving them something, if fatigue and chronic fatigue is an issue, give them a little support there while you're addressing the underlying causes. And next slide. So telomere attrition. So this is where your telomeres get shorter and shorter. And probably most of you have heard this. So what happens when your telomeres run out? Yeah, I know. When your telomeres run out, guess what? The cells turn into zombie cells, or medically speaking, cellular sustenance. Cellular sustenance is zombie cells, meaning they can't reproduce, but they still manage to live, and they put out a ton of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Cellular sustenance creates a lot of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and that's the end result of when your telomeres run out too quick. So there, you know, people, and then they still do telomere testing, which is measuring the telomeres on the end of white blood cells, which is probably okay. I'm not an advocate of that, only simply because, you know, the telomeres on the end of the white blood cells could be different than the telomeres in the heart cells, could be different than the length in the telomeres in the kidney cells, and et cetera. So telomere attrition is a big deal. The biggest stressors they say that shortens telomeres is, and you can look this up on PubMed.com, is oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is what's produced from reactive oxygen species, chemicals, toxins, etc. Okay, that is telomere shortening. That's number one. And then if you look at the 5 primaries or 4 primaries that initiated, stress can do it, sugar can do it, chemicals and toxins can do it, infections can do it, and that's pretty much it. So it's a big deal to help your telomeres, and Dr. Kim has a lot of nutritional support with multiple products that you're using that has so many different herbs in it that are pro telomere protection, one, and actually some of the herbs in it are actually help pro stimulate telomerase, which is what extends the telomere caps. Next slide. Here's some of the diseases that's associated with telomere shortening, I'm sorry. Stress, Alzheimer's, arthritis. So again, all these are what? These are all chronic diseases. These are all stem cells is one, too. But you'll see most of them are. Next slide. I use a combination of these, and some more than others. I love acetylation. I love the beta oxidant, NADH. If you're testing with your clients, your patients, you can really fine tune this to what's best for them. And that's what I'm assuming most of you do anyway, because you can. It's just one of the things I encourage is you try to test across the board, which you're going to see close to the end, that whole panel, and to make sure you're really giving the best for a particular client or customer. Next. And the role of DNA methylation in here, so you can read this: epigenetic clocks, best biomarkers, epigenetics, especially DNA methylation, is a big player in epigenetics, which probably most of you already know that. Next slide. Over-methylation under, so you can over-methylate and you can have under-methylation. So this is interesting because it's something you might want to think of. But the people that do the worst on SSRIs are usually under-methylators. Next slide. Methylson and acetyl. And I would just test. If you're muscle testers, you can really hone in and do a lot, because you can't do a lot of the lab tests for acetylation, phosphorylation, a lot of these things, beta oxidation. You have to either do it with muscle testing or symptomatology or some other process. Next slide. Phosphorylation. So this is a big one because there's so many things it's involved in, particularly with protein function, transmitting signals to the cell. Again, phosphorylation plays a big role in ATP production. It's in metabolism, cellular trafficking, inflammation, others. So the list goes on. And this is why when I saw Dr. Kim create these things, I was kind of blown away. It's like, wow, nobody's done this. And why hasn't they, with all the talk about cellular health? That's what all this is on cellular health. So how can you do cellular health if you're not looking at acetylation, phosphorylation, beta oxidation, that type of thing? So next slide. Loss of proteases. This is another one of your biomarkers in aging. What is the most common disease associated with the loss of proteostasis? Is Alzheimer's, dementia in the brain. So it's where the protein is misfolding in the brain. It's a failure of the protein in the brain. That's why you got amyloid B protein and tau protein. This is all related to the way protein works. What cleans this up? Does anybody know what cleans up a loss of proteostasis? Autophagy cleans it up. That's what the whole purpose of autophagy is. What activates autophagy? AMPK. Okay. What inhibits autophagy? We actually took that slide out. mTOR. mTOR inhibits autophagy. Okay. mTOR inhibits AMPK. So in longevity, mTOR is not on the pro side for extending cellular health and cellular life. It actually, in the scientific community, related to longevity, mTOR's normal levels are fine, but excess inhibits AMPK, inhibits autophagy, and can inhibit other very important FOXO too, which helps with the cellular sustenance. So what helps the cellular sustenance? Autophagy and also FOXO. So anyway, this is a big deal, but where you most often see it is in Alzheimer's and dementia, but it's happening everywhere. The most fascinating thing I found about the loss of proteostasis that I learned is once you change the shape of the protein, it changes its function. And I find that very interesting. Changing the shape changes the function. So I don't think I've heard of where shape changing determines function of tissue before. And maybe I'm missing something, but I thought that was interesting and was hoping someone should share something profound on that. Okay, next slide. Here's what you use. ABLE, acetylation. Like I said, autophagy you have to promote. So your AMPK, which is your Zenadap 2. I use a lot of Zenadap because Zenadap has everything in there is AMPK activators. I mean, it does other purposes too. It lowers cortisol. And I think that was the original design of Zenadap, was to lower cortisol, which it does. But if you look up every one of those herbs, they are all AMPK activators. Next slide. And again, you would test these. Cellular sustenance. Now we're getting to the really bad boy. This is like the one that all these others, if they go completely haywire and, their function is getting way, way low, they promote more zombie cells or cellular sustenance cells. And these cells are not dead cells, but they cannot duplicate. So they no longer have the ability to duplicate, but they don't die. So they hang around and produce huge amounts of inflammatory cytokines. And they also have this affinity or this connection to creating more cellular sustenance cells to its surrounding cells. And cellular sustenance is just zombie cells. So they don't serve you in a way that creates health, but there's one respect where they do, is when there's so much damage, the cell either turns into a cancerous cell or a sustenance cell. Obviously, you prefer the sustenance cell, but you really prefer neither one, the cancer cell or the sustenance cell. The sustenance cell is better than the cancer, obviously, but it still causes a whole variety, a barrage of health issues, which I think we still may have that slide in there. Again, you would use the Rubicel, ABLE, cellular sustenance. You want to really use things that have, and Dr. Kim's products have, some of the products have the bioflavonoids or the flavonoids like Feinstein and quercetin is a anti-cellular sustenance, and Feinstein is an anti-cellular sustenance. And there's another one that's a big one too, and I can't think of it on the top of my mind. But test those, anything you can do to diminish it. And remember, they wouldn't have become sustenance cells if they hadn't completely broke down to a point of no return. So that's why you want to catch them before that time when you really have a potential to turn something around. Next slide. How do we know this paradigm works? Next slide. We did biological age testing. And again, I mentioned that you can do telomeres, you can do testing. Glycan age testing is a good test. Unfortunately, it usually is done out of the country. And it's very, it's like a 7 to 8 week test before you get results. Otherwise, I like it. And then we do the epigenetic DNA test, which is much more accessible, very well accepted in the scientific community for measuring biological age. And again, the only reason I don't use telomeres is because they're measuring the telomeres just on a white blood cell, I think a macrophage, I'm not sure. And that to me is like, well, does that mean the kidney cells are that way and the heart cells are that way and the brain? I wouldn't think so, All right, next slide. So that's what we use. So we did a study with a lot of our clientele who I know would actually follow through on the program and do this study because I paid for it. And we paid for the biological age test. So we did the test before they started. And a lot of these, probably 80% of these people are people that had actually been through our program before we had all this. So we did their before test. And then 3 months later, we did their after test to see how much their biological age improved. So we reevaluate 2 3. We now have extended that where we have some people for a year. The people that have been in the program increase their biological age by 19 years based on independent laboratory testing. That's pretty cool. I'm very excited about that. Next slide. Yeah, we had a few people that also were like, they kind of like, they do Band-Aid nutrition. They find crap on the internet that that treats my prostate, or, they're not into causative effect, cause and effect. They just like, someone take this prostate for me or whatever. So, and no extra charge for the tonality. Anyway, long story short, we had a few of those because I was curious to see those people who'd never done our program that we got to do it, is their initial biological age was older than their chronological age. So if they were 55, their biological age was 60 or 64 or 68. Whereas the people we did that had been on our program started out usually with a better health score, meaning if they were 60 after they'd been doing our regular program, they were usually like 4 years younger. So they had an advantage, but those are the ones now that I've let them go a year, which I'm going to have to stop that soon, considering the investment, because it's been like, they've gotten some amazing change, 19 years. Now, some of the people, we had a lot of people after 3 months decrease our biological age by 7 years on this. We've had a few that only decrease it like 2.5 to 3 years, but most after 3 months decrease our biological age by 7 years. And again, now after a year, we have people that's decreased it 19 years, which should sound amazing to most of you on this, unless you've been able to do it. And again, I'm using an independent laboratory test. So this isn't a questionnaire that determines your age. This is actual EPA epigenetic DNA testing by an independent lab. So I like that kind of validation. Next slide. So again, this is my primary. So now over here on the right, where we used to have, see the bottom ones, circulatory, digestive, that used to be over on the right-hand side. So we would just use all the tissue repair products. Now we go from addressing cause, doing the inflammation, oxidative stress, with the IntegraCell, et cetera. And then the cellular aging, we're testing and have been testing for. And a lot of times we'll cross-reference. I just realized I had my finger up in everybody's face there, didn't I? We're cross-referencing your testing, whether they need a organ tissue support product along with a cellular repair. But I found, next slide, since we have done this, the difference is people that had been on our program doing much, much better and everything else, actually, if they had one thing that was still hanging on, they pushed right through it, because now we've added looking at the whole cellular health. And again, the only reason I'm making such a big deal about this is I haven't found anybody. And again, I'm introduced to many, many companies that are introducing their products to me, because we have as you saw from the staff in the building, we have a decent practice, and nothing on a real true cellular level. I've seen products for the cell membrane, and I've seen methylation products, but the acetylation, the phosphorylation, the beta oxidation, and some of the others I have not seen. So these are the results. So biological age, up to 11 years decrease in biological age. And that was in the 3 months. And then we kept going with some of them, like everybody else. Wow, this is great. and unfortunately they're getting it for free, so they piddled out on me. So I'd like to test them out to see if they maintained it. The first signs of accelerated healing came from the response of the individual. Yeah. So the big positive changes were where we added the whole addressing everything on a cellular level. Next slide. These are just, oh, by the way, these testimonies have been updated, like this guy here in Illinois. He's no longer, his biological age has gone down. He's now down 13 years or more. So we've updated the testimonials, but they aren't on this slide program. Next slide. That was in 3 months, by the way, guys. Here's another one in 3 months. Oklahoma. And these are some of the experiences. You know what the interesting thing is? Which I was a little surprised. Not probably because I'm not as cosmetic attention level, thinking about that in terms of practicing. But I have so many people say their skin, they've had people say their skin, they look so much younger, like they've had a facelift. And I always thought I thought, oh, really? I wasn't even going for that. All right, next slide. Accomplishing new products. So we with all this, we significantly reduced biological age, verified by independent laboratory testing. And it's accelerating tissue repair. Take some of your stubbornest cases, test this stuff, and see if you don't notice a significant improvement. If you get the right things, you'll hit home runs with people you thought you never could. Okay, so here's the chart. I don't know how many of you on here have this chart, but it's available from Inno-Vita, and it's a nice part to put on your wall for many reasons. First and foremost, to remind you in your treatment room or in your room that you do your testing that these things exist and are available, and you should be consciously aware of them when you're considering the issues of the particular person or client involved. So, and again, don't get stuck on specific ones in specific areas. So like, let me give you, for example, if I had someone with a thyroid problem, I would not expect this diagram to match if they also had a adrenal problem. So if you took and tested these on the adrenals versus a thyroid, you're going to get different findings because that tissue has different issues with these dynamics. So that's why, and I said, we just have the bottles, the liquids we test with or the capsules. But I think, do you guys have a kit now for everybody to use with this or not?
We do have a test kit, yes.
A tech for the cellular health products?
Not separated, no.
Okay, all right. So you just want to make sure you have them. So if you're testing for different areas and you're curious, because it gives you good indicators. So if you do have someone that you're struggling with and you're trying to figure out, well, why haven't their energy bounced up? Well, you may check, and you're going, the thyroid's like 50% better, but not well. Well, you may need to address the thyroid with NADH and mitochondria. You may need to address it with acetylation, phosphorylation, or methylation. So that's kind of how we look at it and how it's been very, very effective and responsive for us. So, but if you don't have the chart, see if they have more of them and have it, because it will help you think if you're in the room and you've got it on the wall. And not only that, the most interesting thing that'll happen is your clientele will go, what's this? And ask you more about it, so you can explain to them the value of it and how it can help them. And that's probably all I got for this evening. If I didn't think this can make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, I wouldn't go out of my way to do this. It does. You guys made some powerful products, and they really work. So.